What's up? It's Enigma Hood. So today I want to talk about the death penalty a little bit. And I have spoken about the death penalty before, but I want to make a new video to address some new arguments that have come about that I would like to address when it comes to the death penalty. Now, most people that are subscribed to me probably already know that I'm in favor for the death penalty. And the reason is very simple. I'm not going to try and go about it the route that most dumb people go about trying to rationalize the death penalty, and that's usually deterrence. That's not the primary motivation. That's not the primary reason for why we have the death penalty. In fact, that's not the primary reason for why we punish anyone. The primary reason for why we punish anyone, why the justice system exists in the first place, is out of a need for vengeance from the public at large. That is the primary reason. When someone does something wrong, we feel anger, resentment, and we want retribution. We want the criminal to suffer for what they have done. And that applies to the death penalty as well. It satisfies our need for vengeance. Now, there was a video... There were actually two videos on the Young Turks where they discuss issues like the death penalty and jank. One of the things that annoys me is how he keeps on saying that he's the bad guy for desiring vengeance. Every single human being desires vengeance in some form. Vengeance or revenge is the aggressive behavior that results from anger. And the only way not to desire revenge, not to have even those kinds of impulses, physiological desires, is if you do not possess anger at all. That is the only way you cannot have vengeance. And unless you are cerebral palsy or have something wrong with your brain, you have these emotions. And we have them for a good reason. And I'll get a little bit into that later. This is something that's intrinsic to all of us, but a lot of people suppress this side to them, which is actually not healthy. A psychologist named, I believe his name is Jung, I might be getting it wrong, but Jung, he described that something called the shadow, that's part of everyone's personality. It's the emotions and the desires that every person represses. And they're not necessarily bad, but usually they are the ones that we don't like to talk about, and that's vengeance, revenge, and sadism as well, the desire to inflict suffering and enjoy it. And let's be honest, when you inflict suffering on someone that has raped or murdered or brutally tortured someone, you do derive sadistic pleasure from making a scumbag like that suffer. If you see, there are lots of animal rights activists, but even among non-animal rights activists, if you see someone torturing an animal, it elicits an inimical response towards that person, and you want that person to suffer for what he's doing. If he's torturing needlessly, inflicting unnecessary suffering, you, in turn, want to make that person suffer for what he has done. That is the reason for why we even have the justice system in the first place. We would not have a justice system at all if we did not possess emotions. Now, one of the things they discussed in a Young Turks video is, we should remove emotion from the justice system, from the legal process. Not only would it not work, it doesn't make sense and it's stupid. First of all, if you're trying to remove emotion from the justice system, then you're actually, ironically, removing the primary reason for why we don't kill the vast majority of criminals. The reason why we don't kill most criminals is due to an emotional aversion to killing. It could be argued that not killing certain people is utterly irrational. And the high standard of evidence that we demand for guilt, remember, for a criminal process, It's beyond a reasonable doubt, which is over like 90% certainty, which is ridiculously high. The reason why we demand such high standards of evidence is emotional, because we want to make for certain that this is really the guy that did it. However, it could be argued that this is utterly irrational from a cost-benefit point of view. So if you remove emotion from it, you're removing the primary reason for why we even have that high standard of evidence in the first place, and also the primary reason why we don't kill the vast majority of criminals, when in fact it could be logical to do exactly that. Imagine you have like a machine civilization. What would they do if there's a threat? You just eliminate the threat. If there's any deviance to the system, they just eliminate the deviance, right? That makes sense, because that would be logical. We're not like that, though. We are emotional beings. Therefore, we avert doing things that are emotionally incompatible with how we feel. We don't like killing, and that's a good thing. But there is, of course, a time when killing must be done. The other thing is that we wouldn't have a justice system in the first place if we were emotionless beings. We wouldn't exist in the first place. Natural selection selected for us to have these emotions for a reason, and anger is a big thing, because anger promotes an aggressive type of behavior. It promotes a retaliatory type of behavior. When someone wrongs you, you want them to suffer for what they have done. Imagine that you have an emotionless human civilization. Someone stole all my stuff. I don't care. I'm emotionless. I have no emotional response to that. I don't seek retribution for the person that did this to me. I'm just going to sit here and not care. Someone raped my sister. I don't care. Someone killed my father. I don't care. Someone killed me, and no one else cares. The reason why we have a justice system in the first place is because we have emotions. If we didn't have emotions, no one would care, no one would ever seek retribution for wrongdoing, and society would collapse and our species would eventually go extinct. So to make a justice system under the assumption that we should remove emotion from it is fallacious and stupid. It makes no sense. Makes absolutely no sense. You just want to select which emotions should be removed. We shouldn't have vengeance, therefore we should remove it and we should abolish the death penalty. No, that doesn't make any sense. The reason for why we have a justice system in the first place is because we have emotions. It doesn't make sense to remove emotion from the equation unless you are dealing with an emotionless civilization, like a civilization of robots. Only then would it make sense to have such a system. Now, in the latest Young Turks video, one of the latest, they brought up Cenk brought up an objection to the death penalty, and he got very emotional over it because there was a particular case where someone was wrongfully implicated with a murder, and he was sitting on death row for 30 years, and only recently has he been exonerated from this crime. And I agree completely that this was a horrible malpractice of the law, of justice, and it sickens me to know that the prosecutors simply prosecuted this guy, who was black, simply because he was black, and they were more likely to get a guilty conviction from an all-white jury, which the jury was all white. And then he used this example as as rationale for abolishing the death penalty, because mistakes can be made. So out of all the objections to the death penalty, you might think that this is the most compelling one, but I don't believe that's the case at all. Just because there is the possibility for malpractice or mistakes or miscarriages of justice does not mean that the death penalty should be abolished. It is, however, reason to reform the justice system. It's worth reforming. However, our desire for vengeance has not changed. We still desire vengeance for the most abhorrent and despicable of crimes. I want to clarify the types of people that I think do deserve the death penalty. I actually don't think all murderers necessarily deserve the death penalty. Only the most brutal and sadistic of people deserve it. like the BTK killer or those psychopaths in Ukraine back in the 2000s who brutally killed that man with a hammer. Remember, you guys might know these guys as the 3 guys, 1 hammer video, the snuff video, which was the most disgusting, abhorrent thing I've ever seen in my life. Those scumbags deserve to die. They absolutely deserve to die. And the fact that mistakes can be made does not somehow abolish our desire for vengeance for these scumbags. Now, the abolitionist would argue that what is the lesser of 2 evils? Like you could make the argument that this man who was wrongfully accused of murder spent 30 years of his life in prison, and those 30 years are 30 years that he'll never get back. And the abolition, and then you could make the argument that well, so that was a wrongdoing, and those 30 lives he's never going to get back, right? So is that compelling reason to abolish life in prison? Of course not. Just because mistakes can be made doesn't mean that we should abolish the punishments that we have for abhorrent crimes. It means that the system needs to be reformed. The abolitionist, on the other hand, would argue that what is the lesser of 2 evils? Because at least in this case, in the case of life in prison, there is a person that we can release and he can go free. Whereas in the case of the death penalty, if you killed him prior to this, he would be dead. And there are 2 ways to look at this. There are 2 points of view. From the point of view of the person that was killed, ironically enough, he suffers a lot less if he's killed because he's now in a state where he cannot care. He doesn't care about whether he's alive or dead because he's dead. So he actually suffered a lot less than the person that was in prison for 30 years. And, you know, even though he's out and he's happy, and that's great, and he should be compensated, it's still nothing that... you could make the argument that's a lot more egregious of a punishment than just killing him because he suffered a lot less. The other stipulation to make is that, okay, from the point of view, from the outsider, from the people that are living, yes, killing this person is a much more egregious malpractice because the person is dead, and we have an aversion to killing people that do not deserve to die. Obviously, this person who did not commit this murder does not deserve to die. That is a more egregious mistake. I will concede that is the case. However, I will also make a few other stipulations that even in that case, there are other living beings, family members to the person that was killed, wrongfully killed, that can be compensated, and the people who are responsible for this malpractice of justice should be punished severely for what they have done. Probably, I would argue they deserve life in prison for that, for this kind of malpractice. That is the most abhorrent thing that you can do, to knowingly convict someone, knowingly convict an innocent person. So yes, I will grant the abolitionist that killing someone who is innocent is much more an egregious malpractice than putting them in life, putting an innocent person in prison for life. However, that is not reason to abolish it necessarily. It is reason to reform it. Those are my contentions. People can disagree with them. I don't really care. But these are my opinions, and I stand by them. And the fact of the matter is, most of the time, the abolitionists get very angry and used hostile language and insults, which demonstrates that they are exactly the same as all of us who desire vengeance. The only difference is that we actually have the guts to admit it, and they don't, and they are dishonest. Anyway, that's all I gotta say. This is Enigma Hood signing off.